Hi. So this is not exactly what I was hoping we would be doing, that we would do this in person, but failing that, this is a pretty good second substitute. So I hope you're sitting somewhere comfortably. For reasons I don't entirely understand, it has mirrored this, but you'll catch the drift. Okay, so let's do a little equipment troll. I've taped this down because mine's a little bit curly. Hopefully, when you have yours, they'll be flat, so it won't be a problem. But just taping it down with some washi tape is always a good tip to keep it in place. You're going to get 3 paint colors. So you're getting a red, a yellow, and a blue. So I'm only using those 3 colors today, and we're going to make the green and the brown. I'm also using one brush, which is what you will also have, which is a number 2 round. And that is it. I've got a little cloth, so always suggest having a little cloth. I've got a clean glass of water, got a little bug on my paper, and I've got a little palette, which as you can tell is pretty messy, but I'm just going to use it because actually the blue that we use and the red and the yellow are already here. So I'm just going to go with what I already have on the palette. So the first thing to note is, in order to get this sheet printed, which is a design of a Ukrainian flower crown, I guess for obvious reasons, this paper is not watercolor paper. So I have done a trial and it does actually take watercolor pretty well, but we just can't go crazy with the water content. So the first thing we're going to do is get some water on our brush, and we're going to get some of the yellow and put it on our palette, although I actually have quite a bit, but never mind. And we're going to put a little bit on the palette so that we can paint these amazing sunflowers. So a little bit of water on the brush, yeah. Dab some in your paint. Now what's always nice, and hopefully you have some spare, is a little piece of paper, because what you can use that for is just to test how much do I have on my brush, what's the exact color. It's not so critical when we're using paint straight from the tube, but if you're going to be mixing, which is what we're going to do in a little bit, then it's really helpful. So I can see this is a nice strong yellow on here, which is great. So I know I'm happy with that, and I'm happy with the consistency. So I've added water so that it's easy to paint, but it's not very, very wet. And there's quite a lot of pigment in there, yeah? So that would be my tip. But you've got a couple of sheets. So that's really the reason why I added a couple of sheets, because I just thought, just in case, it's one's kind of a practice sheet, so that you can see how much water do I need, do I like the colors I've mixed. Some of those questions are always good to think about with a practice sheet, but this is really just designed to be super relaxing and not going to require too much thought or energy. Because I don't know about you guys, but I am feeling a little bit depleted, which is why I thought a colouring page would be a nice thing to do, because it just seemed as if maybe everyone else is feeling a little depleted at the moment and actually could use a bit of a break. So I'm starting to feel that the paint's getting a little bit thick. So I'm just gonna dab my brush in, go back in and just kind of add a little bit more moisture, probably a little bit too much moisture. If, like me, you've put too much moisture on your brush, just dab it on your towel. You can always go back in with your brush and pull some of it off. So on watercolor paper, you know, if it's a bit too wet, you can probably leave it, if it's okay, if it's not going to run into something else. But on paper like this, because it's not waterproof, it's not watercolor paper, it's probably a good idea to pick up the excess. If it's a really big puddle that's been created, then absolutely dab it with your towel. Yeah, that towel is really there to help you control some of the water. So the reason I wanted to do a Ukrainian flower crown, I guess, is kind of obvious given what's happening at the moment. For me, it's also a little bit personal. One of my classmates, when I went off to do my master's, is Ukrainian. And I remember being invited to an American classmate's family home for Thanksgiving. So we all went off to Long Beach to Uncle Joe's, which was, I don't know, I think they had 40 people. We spent a lot of time in Uncle Joe's man cave, which was his garage, which he'd kind of retrofitted with like a record player and a billiard table. It was super man cave. And my classmate, American classmate, had invited us because we were foreign students, and he thought it would be nice for us to actually have Thanksgiving. So he invited me, he invited my Russian friend, my Panamanian friend, and our Ukrainian friend. So I remember turning up to Uncle Joe's house, and he was ecstatic. It was almost as if we were his Christmas present. He was so excited to have 4 foreigners in the same Thanksgiving party. And I have to say, it was very touching. There was a colossal amount of food, as you can probably imagine. I saw the biggest television screen in a residential home that I've ever been witness to. And Uncle Joe read a letter before we started eating. And I could tell, and was told later by several of the family, that Uncle Joe reads this letter every Thanksgiving. And the letter was written by his great-grandfather to his son, and has been handed down through the family to be read at Thanksgiving every year. And Uncle Joe is the one who is continuing that tradition. I thought it was very touching, and I sincerely hope that the family continues to do it, because I think it was really special. But they were all standing around, having heard it every year since they were born, with their eyes rolling, desperate to start Thanksgiving dinner. But the letter was really, I think, pretty touching and really appropriate for Thanksgiving, because in the letter, his great-grandfather was talking about what his childhood was like, what it was like to walk 20 miles, and I know we've probably all heard these stories, but to walk 20 miles through the swamp to get to his schoolhouse, which was a one-room schoolhouse with children of all ages, and try and focus on getting an education, and then walk back an hour through the swamp again to his home to go home and do his chores. And the letter was really just saying that he was proud because he had managed to get an education, to provide for his family, and those hardships weren't hardships that his children had, but he wanted to remind them that life can be full of hardship, and that we need to be grateful for the things that we can achieve and the things that we can enjoy. So really a perfect letter for Thanksgiving. But as we were standing there and we're all enjoying it, I think the family were just like, oh, can we get on with the food? But I think for the 4 of us who hadn't experienced an American Thanksgiving, in a family home like that. It was really special. So we have a lovely night. Uncle Joe really, I mean, we could not have been more exciting to him. He said to my Russian friend, oh, he said, so have you traveled around a lot? And she said, no, because I really like history. And there's really nothing to see here. And Uncle Joe was horrified because, as he explained, there are buildings dating back to the 18th century. And he was flabbergasted to hear that in Russia, they have things dating way, way before then. That the 18th century is kind of late for them. And I just remember us leaving. And as we're leaving, Uncle Joe is waving goodbye to us. And he gets very exuberant. And he says, you know, goodbye, my Panamanian friend, goodbye, my Hong Kong friend. And then he said, and goodbye, my Russian friends. And I strongly remember Alexei, who had had a very nice evening and been very welcomed, just shouting at Uncle Joe, I am Ukrainian. And it really stuck with me because it wasn't something that they discussed, but it was something Alex felt really deeply. And yeah, so that has kind of stuck with me as a memory. So that's why I decided to do this Ukrainian flower crown. So these are Ukrainian spring flowers. So we have the sunflower, which is obviously the national flower. We've got a little bit of mimosa. So I'm using the same yellow, but what I'm doing is I'm not painting to the edges of the mimosa. I'm just putting yellow dots, covering kind of most of the mimosa, little dot flowers, but not the whole thing, because I want to leave a little bit of white, just so that the petal is clearly differentiated from the sunflower petals, because we're using the same color. Yeah, the reason why the color palette is so limited, partly I think it's fun to mix colors, so that's also part of the fun of doing it this way, but also because I really wanted to make sure that the yellow and the blue stood out. So if we'd had multiple different yellows, it would be a bit less standouty. I'm not sure if that's actually a word. So the other thing I'm going to paint yellow, so I'm doing all the yellows first, as you can see, is I'm going to paint the center of these little cosmos flowers. So again, another spring flower in Ukraine. And conveniently, for my purposes, the cosmos is a bright blue, so really pretty blue color. Okay, so we've painted all the yellows, so we can clean our brush a little bit. Then we have a choice to make about what do we do next. So given that we have some wet yellow centers, I'm going to take the red next, and I'm going to do the tulips. So tulips again, another beautiful spring flower. And it seemed like we needed something different, a different color, just to break up the blue and the yellow, so it wasn't so overwhelming. So I'm just going to take my little card. Now, I've added quite a lot of water to the red. If you don't, let me show you how strong this red can be. The red can be like this, very, very strong, which is great, fantastic color, but that's what I would like to use for the font, for the text. So I'm going to go with the red that is more watery for the tulip petals. Okay, so just get some on my brush. check in. Yeah, still the watery color I want to do. And I'm just going to do nice big sweeps. You don't need to be too fancy. So this is one nice thing about doing a contour drawing like this, with a little bit of the contrasting shading done, but not overly, is that you can just treat it like big washes of color. And so we don't have to be too careful with how we paint that. We can just go in and put a nice big wash of color on the petals. I would say in general, I think it's good discipline to try and paint the individual petals, because if you then start doing a painting that is more detailed, you're going to need to be able to be careful and stick within your petal, but it's not too important for something where you're colouring in a line drawing like this, because the idea is what we're doing is just creating something that's sort of easy and pretty and not stressful in the least. Okay, so I'm leaving this bit empty because I'm going to make this green to make it part of the leaf. So I've just painted these petals. I'm going to go on the other side of my drawing now and paint this tulip. Sometimes it's just nice to have thought about your color composition. What are the colors that I like? It's always a good first starting point. And what are the colors that I think would work together? So when I was trying to design this, I kind of drew it first and then had a couple of different goes at painting it, so that I could see if I thought the colors would work. Because I did do a version that was just blue and yellow, and it looked too flat. You actually need the other colors, particularly because it's spring, and I think we have this real sense of love for the spring flowers, spring colors. You actually need more color on this one. So now I'm going to put a little bit of blue on the palette, and as before, so if you've been to the class, you know, if you look to the side, and I'm now kind of tilting my head down to the side, I can see that it's dry. So those yellows in the blue cosmos, I know won't run. Okay, so I'm gonna wet my blue. I want my blue pretty watery as well, so let's just check that. Oh, that is strong. Okay, I'm gonna make it more watery. That is strong. I wonder if that is the blue. I'm gonna pause for a moment, get the other blue that I have. Oh, because I think for me that blue is a little bit strong for this design, because this is quite a pale. I don't think it was ultramarine. Sorry, I'm just having a look at my loose watercolors and feeling that I guess this must be the blue that I used, which is confusing to me, but there we go. So let's try that. Let's see if this is better. I think. I think I'm going to go with the first one. I think I'm just going to make sure it's watery. Yeah. I don't think you need to worry so much about this, because yours will be the colour that I've made sure is right. So you don't have to stress. I'm just making sure that this is pale enough. So now it's just simple. All I'm going to do is just go in and paint the blue. So you can obviously use any size brush, but I think it's helpful if you're painting something small like this to use a brush that is small, because otherwise it's just another layer of stress, and this is not about that. But it's just relaxing. It's just about having a nice time with paint. So what could you do with this? So you could just pin it up somewhere on a board or something, or you could turn it into a card. So you could paint it and then write on the back, send it as a card to somebody. You could paint it and then digitize that image and use that as a card to send to somebody. Lots of options for what to do with something that you've painted. Or you could just give it to somebody as a spring present. I think sometimes we don't get to do easy things. That our work is often really challenging. I know I feel that a lot of the days. Sometimes it's very rewarding, but often it's challenging. That life at the moment seems to be incredibly challenging, not to mention confusing and unsettling. And so it's really nice to just sit down and do something easy that doesn't demand too much of your neocortex. Kind of lets all of that brain functioning just relax and have a break and just paint. I think it's really relaxing. I don't think I do it often enough. Generally, if I'm painting, it's because I've tried to make something. So I'm really focused on it, thinking about it, which is its own de-stressor, I think. Trying to figure out the challenges of the image that you're making, I think, is also relaxing in its own way. But there is something quite nice about just thinking about colour and consistency and not having to worry too much about, does this look like something? Because the reality is it already looks like something because it's been drawn. So the other thing I was going to say is, if you wanted to make more of these and put them on watercolor paper, one very simple way is just to transfer the image. Easiest way is to go over the back of so print this on a sheet of A4 printer paper, go over the back of it with a pencil, turn it over, put it on your A4 paper, your watercolor paper, and then just go over it. So just like an old-fashioned transfer. So if you wanted to put it on an actual piece of watercolor paper and really go nuts with the painting, that would be an option. I think for me, this paper is pretty impressive, holding up pretty well. And I think it's a pretty simple design. So it's nice to just do it lightly with these colors. But if you wanted to do a proper painting and maybe use this as a guide, not have the lines, that would definitely be an easy way to get it onto watercolor paper. I kind of didn't do that for this exercise because it seemed like more work, and I was really thinking about how do I make this very low-key so that people can just do it. Okay, so we've now painted our blues, our yellows, our reds. I'm gonna just rinse off my brush. Next step is to paint our browns. So the center of the sunflowers needs to be brown. So all I'm going to do that is I've got a little bit of puddle of red here, and I've got a little puddle of yellow here. I think you can just see in my palette, I have a little space where I've already done this before. So I'm going to take some yellow and take a little bit of red and mix them together. Okay, so what I'm then going to test the color and see, is that brown enough? So that's too orange still. So I'm going to take a little bit more red. Now let's assess. So now we're getting browner, so I'm getting happier with that. Take a little bit more. And then we've kind of got this very dark red, which I'm fine with. So it's kind of a rusty brown color. That's fine for the sunflowers. I'm going to use what's on my brush and just paint these in. So it's nice if you can do it lightly enough that all of those little marks can be seen. If your brush has got too much paint on it and you think, uh-oh, I've kind of lost it in a sea of paint, all you need to do is just take your little towel, dab, and take off the excess paint. Because we're not doing any detail with paint, it's nice to be able to let some of those small lines on the drawing come through. Okay, lovely. So we've now done the brown for the sunflowers. Next step is green. So to mix green, all I'm going to do is, I'm going to try and find a little patch, maybe here, there's a little patch that's not totally gone, that I'm going to pick some of the blue up. I'm going to rinse my brush actually, because that yellow is very light. Get some yellow and mix it together. And what I've made, I'm sure you can see that, what I've made is this kind of very yellow green, which from my perspective is perfect because I want something that's going to pop against these colors. But because you've made it from these colors, it will also blend with them. It will work. So I'm just going to go in now and paint my leaves. So you could also, if you wanted to do something a bit more, you could also make a bluer green, for example, and use that to paint some of the leaves so that the leaves are not all the same color. But I think for the purposes of today and for this demo, I'm just gonna keep them this kind of yellow-green color, which I think is kind of pretty. And it's also simple. I think catchphrase for this design is simple. And then it's just a question of going in, painting all the little leaves. Sometimes it's a question of finding the little leaves, I have to say. And I have sneakily, just in case you have not seen them, also put some little twigs, stems, there we go, stems, that sounds better, in the mimosa. So you'll see there's also some little straight lines that are stems that will need to be painted green as well. And then it's got these little spiky leaves. Yeah, but I hope you're finding some time to do something fun, simple, easy, like this. Even some might say silly, because I think we all need it. I really do. I was talking to somebody who was wondering if I could get my mediation clients to go and do painting before they come to mediation, which I thought sounded fantastic, but possibly not something that would go down well here. That it might seem a little bit too hippie. Although I think from a kind of mental health perspective, there'd be a real benefit to having people do something that would allow them space to not be triggered. But there we go. These are the kind of musings, I guess, that I am prone to when I'm trying to think of how can I combine painting with my day job in a way that's going to be helpful to people. But obviously it has to be something that you want to do. So we're getting to the end of the design, and then the next step is really just filling in the text and the ribbon. But as you can see, it's really the same process. So all we're doing is we're going to clean our brush, go back in, get blue, going to check. So blue's good, yeah. And that's it, we just go around and paint in the ribbon. So I don't know if you can hear those birds outside, but they have been really going for it this morning. So this is a Sunday, which means that I get to do a walk. Well, several walks, let's be honest, with my dog. And we started at 6, and because she is very fond of a small cottage overlooking the reservoir, we then spent an hour sitting in what I guess would have been the garden for the cottage, watching people walking past, dogs walking past, people she felt she needed to bark at for reasons I do not understand. But having a lovely time collecting a whole series of leaves, twigs, something sticky, I don't know what that was, on her tummy. Now, to make life a little bit easier for myself, I'm going to paint the font next. The reason is, if I paint this ribbon, potentially I'm going to have to wait for that to dry to be able to go in to paint the text. So when you're painting, just always think, is there space for my hand, or am I going to have to wait for something to dry to get in there? So I'm going to go back. I'm going to go back to the red. I'm going to make it a little bit more pigmented. What I mean by that is a little bit less paint, a little bit less water, a little bit less water, a little bit more paint. So we can see that's a pretty bright red, more pigmented than the tulips. The reason is because I just want this to kind of be bright and stand out. And if I do it the same slightly washed out red, it won't have the same impact. So I want to make sure that the text is bright, that it looks strong. So I'm kind of hoping that I won't be having to make a Ukrainian summer floral crown, but I will do it if I need to. But I am hoping that there's a different, we're not in this for a long haul. But I wanted to thank you for signing up and joining me. It's a little bit weird because we're on YouTube. Kind of hoping that eventually we will all get to do this in the same room, which is really special. And I have really enjoyed having people in the room doing something creative together. It's been a real joy this last year experiencing that. And just seeing people in a different context, it's quite funny seeing how people relax and learning about some of their hidden skills. So people you didn't know who had hidden either painting skills or calligraphy skills. So yeah, so I'm going to go back and pick up blue again. I'm just going to check in to see, yep, still the same. Because that's another thing, you don't want to kind of change your ribbon color too much. A little bit of variation is fine. And then it's just a question of painting in your ribbon. And kind of just paying attention because it's quite small, the thin spaces that you're painting. For some of this ribbon, I guess I could have thought about making a thicker ribbon when I was drawing it, but thinner seemed better, more aesthetic. But yeah. But nice just doing some quiet painting, Sunday morning. Having walked the dog. Obviously, not having walked the dog, this would not be happening because there would be some frustration. But luckily, she's now conked out on the balcony. So that is good news. Yeah. So yeah, it's nice if you can find time. I know it's not practical for everybody to have time, but even if you kind of do 10-minute increments, the nice thing about watercolor is it might dry, it will dry as the water evaporates, but you can always reactivate it. So if you can leave your palette, you never have to waste paint, which is why my palette is full of bits of paint, because I don't want to waste them. Okay, so there we go. So there is, I'm gonna put my brush down, there is your Ukrainian flower crown painted. I hope you had fun painting it. I had fun painting it with you. And I am really excited about hopefully one day being in the same physical space to do another flow workshop. But if not, take care and have some good painting. Bye.